This is the Endorphin Elite 3, and with it, Saucony is promising an all-new experience with a newly designed midsole and a newly designed slotted carbon fiber plate. But will the changes be enough to provide the extra bit of aggressiveness I was hoping for from the previous version? It's time to lace up the Endorphin Elite 3 and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys about the Saucony Endorphin Elite 3. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that was sent to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Endorphin Elite 3, and let's start with the specs. This is a 39.5 millimeter stack height shoe with an 8 millimeter drop, giving us 31.5 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. And in this shoe, we've got two components. One is that slotted carbon fiber plate that I was talking about. And I'm not sure exactly what are the changes to the design that Saucony is talking about. I haven't had a chance to see the new design, but what I mean by slotted carbon fiber plate is instead of like a spoons type shape that you might see in other carbon fiber plates, it's slotted. And the idea is that if you're landing a little bit unevenly, it's still going to be a stable landing because the plate is able to bend in different areas before it then decompresses into the next foot strike. And the other part that is in this shoe is the Incredi-Run foam. And we saw Incredi-Run for the first time last year in the Endorphin Elite version 2. It's a very lightweight and very squishy, airy midsole foam. And that Incredi-Run is made out of supercritical TPEE, which is thermoplastic copolyether elastomer. And there's two main differences that I'm seeing. The biggest one is that there is no longer this cutout in the outer midfoot of the shoe. They filled that in on the Endorphin Elite version 3. And I think what that's supposed to do is make the shoe a little bit more rigid for people who maybe need a little bit of stability on that outer edge of the foot, because there is a single piece of foam rather than one that has a break in the middle. The other thing that I noticed that's a little bit different between these two shoes, and it's not as big of a difference as the absence or presence of that notch on the side of the shoe, is that there are taller sidewalls in the Endorphin Elite 3. And the sidewalls are the area that go over the side of your foot to create sidewalls, and that's supposed to help keep the foot a little bit more secure in here. And again, that's going to help with a little bit more stability, both on the medial and on the lateral sides of the foot. On the bottom of the shoe, we have a little window into the carbon fiber plate, and we also have some exposed foam. Most of the outsole though is covered with PowerTrack spelled with 2 out of the 3 vowels missing, and that's a rubber compound. There's a very thin application of it, but they are trying to cover a lot of surface area and balance the two competing needs for having rubber for protection of the foam and for grip, but also not trying to have too much in there so you could save some weight. On the upper, there are some more changes to the design here. The Endorphin Elite and a lot of Saucony's Elite product is usually a place where Saucony designers can go wild. And I love when Saucony designers are just unleashed to do what they can do when it comes to upper design. Last year's Endorphin Elite 2 did kind of tone things down a little bit. We do have this very open and airy, strong mesh material throughout most of the shoe. And then we've got some knit in the tongue, which I generally like to see knit. And then this 1080 version 10 reminiscent heel cup in the back. This year, the heel cup kind of gets a little bit more normal. It's not as bold of a statement. It gets a little bit shorter. There's a little bit more padding in the back of the heel. There's even a little bit of a pull tab in there now. We're keeping that same knit tongue. And then the material that we're seeing for the upper, to me, seems like a little bit of a downgrade. It is lightweight, it is breathable, and it is pretty, but it's not quite as kind of race day special as what we've seen in some earlier versions of the Endorphin Pro series and also in the earlier versions of the Endorphin Elite. The fit to me is pretty similar as what we saw last year in the Endorphin Elite 2, which was, I think, a big improvement over some of the sizing issues that the Endorphin Elite 1 had, where that toe box was a little bit on the shallow side. Endorphin Elite 2 and Endorphin Elite 3 give plenty of room for the toes, both in terms of width and height of that toe box. And I think it's probably one of the more generous fits that you're going to find in racing today. So I went with my usual running shoe size, and I'm going to recommend that for most people out there. These days, I'm looking for a race product to be at 200 grams or lighter than that. This isn't the heaviest of race day shoes out there, but it is a little bit on the heavy side, weighing in on my scales for my US men's size 9 at a measured weight of 216 grams or 7.6 ounces. Now that we talked about what this shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. I don't think that calling this shoe all new is quite accurate. I feel like this shoe is very similar to last year's version. It's a very soft experience. I think one of the softest marathon racing shoes that's on the market today. I feel like I'm really compressing that foam. I feel like I'm moving through the entire stack height with each foot strike, and that's what's giving me that really nice and pleasant soft feeling. And that makes this shoe really comfortable, I think, for everything from daily training all the way up to marathon speeds. And I feel like I could certainly use this shoe as a very comfortable and very fun daily trainer. It'd just be a very expensive way to do daily training. And I think for some people, the extreme squishiness of the shoe would be a little bit too unstable. But that instability kind of resolves itself as you start spooling up and getting up into marathon pace and even a little bit faster than that. That's where I feel like the foam is responding optimally in terms of the compression and the decompression to make for a very fun experience. But I do find that the faster that I go, the more that I feel like the shoe starts to feel a little bit mushy. So when I'm talking about the compression, which gives me that softness, I feel like it's not decompressing with quite as much pop or energy as I'd like to. So it feels kind of like it's staying a little bit muddled in that compressed state. And it's not getting me back quite as much as I'd like from a shoe that I would want to try to run a marathon PR in. And the faster I want to go in the shoe, the more I feel like I'm just carrying a lot of shoe with me, and the relative weight of the shoe kind of starts to make itself known. It feels like to me that I'm kind of falling into each stride rather than hitting the ground and then popping off into the next stride. So like last time, I feel like this shoe is just a little bit too soft for me and not aggressive enough. But aside from what I personally like, I think that for a lot of people, the Endorphin Elite 3, just like the Endorphin Elite 2 before it, could represent a very nice mix of both comfort and speed. I think the knit in the tongue is really nice. The redesigned heel cup, I think, is going to really work well for a lot of people, probably better than the previous heel cup design did. And so I feel like for people that think that some of the marathon racing shoes out there are too tight around the foot and are too firm or harsh or aggressive, I think that the Endorphin Elite 3 is going to provide a nice alternative to some of those other shoes. And I think because of the changes to that midsole design and the increased sidewalls, I think it's going to open up that shoe to be a feasible option to even more people. Now let's wrap up this video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some alternatives. The Saucony Endorphin Elite 3 is the squishiest marathon shoe that's on the market right now. And I think it's ideally situated for mid-foot strikers who want the softest possible marathon experience. It's a little bit too soft for my personal preferences. I want something that's a little bit more aggressive. So I'm thinking about this shoe as kind of like an ideal long run shoe, something that I would take for those biggest long runs where I'm going to have some marathon effort miles in there. And I want to prioritize comfort a little bit more than I do speed, because I have to then continue recovering quickly and getting ready for the next week of training. But I think at the $290 retail price that this shoe is going to come out at, I think that makes it a little bit expensive to use only on Saturdays. If you are looking for a way to save a little bit of money, I think you can go back to the Endorphin Elite 2 and get a lot of the same experience, but you can find this at a discount now of about $200, which makes it a pretty good deal for what you're getting in this shoe, even if you are only going to use it for long runs. But now let's take a look at what the rest of the market has to offer. And I think when it comes to very squishy marathon shoes, the one that definitely comes to mind is from ASICS, and this is the Metaspeed Ray. Now this is a shoe that is probably the next squishiest shoe that's available on the market. It's using a different kind of foam and a different kind of plate though. This is using ATPU in contrast to the supercritical TPEE that's available in the Endorphin Elite 3. And that has a partial carbon fiber plate. It's more of a teardrop shape in the front half of the shoe, but it is not slotted. It is one single solid piece. And the result of the different foam and the different plate is that while this foam is extremely squishy, it also gives me that bounce back that I'm looking for on the decompression as I'm pushing into the next stride. So I'm getting the best of both worlds where it's really soft, but it's also still really fast. The shoe is also pretty much impossibly light as well. It's like 3 ounces lighter than the Endorphin Elite 3 is, and a lot of that comes down to the ATPU. Lightness is one of its primary characteristics, and also this extremely minimal upper, which is a little bit hard to get on, but once you're in there, it's absolutely fine. The fit isn't quite as generous in this shoe either, but for me, this is the kind of shoe that I want to be wearing when I'm racing. Another big difference between the Metaspeed Ray and the Endorphin Elite 3 is, I think, the foot strike for whom this shoe would be ideal. I feel like the Endorphin Elite 3 is ideal for midfoot strikers because then you're going to hit squarely on the flat part of the shoe and then roll forward into the net foot strike. I think on the Metaspeed Ray, this is a shoe that's really intended for forefoot strikers. So that could be one way of deciding between those two. Otherwise, the price is another deciding factor, as the Metaspeed Ray is a little bit more expensive at $300. Now the next shoe that I want to talk about is another midfoot striker shoe. So we're going midfoot striker to midfoot striker, and it's also another shoe that I think is pretty squishy. This is from Hoka. This is the Cielo X1 3.0. The biggest difference between these two shoes is that the Cielo X1 3.0 isn't as squishy as the Metaspeed Ray or the Endorphin Elite 3, but it is very responsive. It's got a really nice bounce to it. I feel like I'm getting more of a race day experience in the Cielo X1 3.0 compared to the somewhat more relaxed experience in the Endorphin Elite 3. The shoes end up being pretty much the same weight. The Cielo X1 3.0 is a little bit lighter, but I think that when it comes to that a little bit more aggressiveness that I like what the Cielo X1 3.0 is delivering. And you are going to save a little bit by going to the Cielo X1 3.0 because that shoe comes in at $275, which I still think is a lot of money to pay for a race shoe, but I guess you're saving money by going with the Hoka. So those are my thoughts on the Endorphin Elite 3. Let me know if you have any questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?